Football.
Here we go.
Very exciting. Joy Taylor in for Colin Cowherd here on The Herd. Thank you guys so much for joining us today alongside Alex Curry. As you just heard, we've got a matchup. November 13th, Week 10, Cowboys at the Packers. I'm very, very excited for this. I can't wait for the full schedule release, but this game is going to be something. So it'll be Mike McCarthy's return to Lambeau. It'll probably be the most watched game of the year. And both of these teams have a tremendous amount to prove. These quarterbacks both lost a lot this offseason. Obviously, Dallas losing Amari Cooper, Cedric Wilson, La'el Collins, Randy Gregory, Connor Williams. So what is Dak going to do? How is he going to adjust without his number one target in Amari Cooper? That'll be a storyline all season long. And of course, Devontae Adams is no longer in Green Bay. Neither is Marquez Valdez-Scantling or Zadarius Smith. He also lost offensive coordinator and quarterback coach, did Aaron Rodgers, who had the noisiest year maybe in NFL history, and lost at home as an MVP and a number one seed to a wild card team. So both of these teams, and Dallas' season didn't end any prettier. So both of these teams have a lot to prove this year. They are going to be playing on fire, and I expect this game to be very high stakes. Two great brands, so I'm very excited for this matchup and for the rest of the schedule release, which will be Thursday night, tomorrow at 8 Eastern on FS1 and NFL Network. But the biggest matchups, obviously, always here on Fox, and this one is going to be one that you circle on the calendar when we get that release tomorrow. Let's get to Alex Curry with the news.
No. Turn on the news.
That the Sixers did not. And I'm not going to say that I hated watching it because generally blowouts are pretty boring, and it wasn't great for the rest of the NBA. But for Heat fans, we quite enjoy a blowout. Look, when it's your team, you're like, a blowout is really fun.
Yeah.
Every shot is still exciting. But for everyone else, that was a rough watch. So we will get to that. We'll have Nick Wright, Melissa Rowland, Fox Sports NBA reporter, discuss all of that with both of them as well. And Jonathan Vilma will join us in studio later. And the NFL schedule release is starting to trickle out. We have a big game here, lots of big games here on Fox, but one in particular that we found out about that we will discuss. But let's start with it's not South Beach, it's downtown Miami that the Miami Heat play in. So let's start in downtown Miami, where the Heat made some work of the Sixers last night, 120-85. Obviously, I could sit here and gloat about the Heat all day, but we know that they're a good team. Well, shoot from three, saw Duncan Robinson sighting. And, they play good defense. But let's not talk about the Heat right now. We can talk about James Harden. Because after that win over the Heat, we all kind of maybe got a little bit excited. And it was something to be excited about. James Harden is an exciting player. He's one of the greatest offensive players in NBA history. To see a performance like that from him in Philadelphia, to feel the excitement of the Sixers fans, to see that fire in his eyes again, even, at the demise of the Heat, was fun to watch. Because you can enjoy a great basketball player having a moment. But it might just be that. Overall, that game for the Sixers was brutal last night, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But focusing on James Harden, it does appear at this point that we have a solid book on what James Harden is, which is a really talented scorer, had a 5-year stretch where he averaged 32 points a game, kind of took advantage of the rules, which I have no problem with. If you are a player whose skill leans into getting to the free throw line and getting calls, do that. The problem is you're not going to get those calls in the postseason. And that's where things shift for James Harden. I felt like James Harden, out of everyone in the postseason, had the most pressure on him. You can talk about the Nets. I didn't think the Nets had really any pressure on them. I had no expectations for the Nets in this postseason. Giannis has already proven himself. Who else really had anything to prove in this postseason? What was the team that made a big move during the season to get the star? Well, that was the Sixers. And James Harden has now forced his way out of two teams in the last 2 years. And it seems again that we are at a place where it doesn't really fit. Now, obviously, the series is not over. So maybe all of this is premature. But if you look at his performances throughout this series, he has had one standout performance, and his second half performances, which you would mostly call important and or clutch time, he has been mostly brutal outside of game 4 where he had 18. Game 1, for our radio audience, 4 points, no threes. Game 2, 4 points, no threes. Game 3, 2 points, no threes in the second half. Game 4, obviously, huge performance. And game 5 last night, 4 points in the second half, went 1 for 3 from the three-point line. And that's kind of what James Harden is in the postseason. Now, had he been playing at an extreme level during the regular season, then maybe this would be particularly surprising. But this is why we were having the conversation about if James Harden is washed. I don't necessarily believe he is, but I also don't think we can call him a winner at this point. He is a great regular season player who puts up a ton of points, who does get his team to the postseason, and then burns out. He's made it past the second round in 8 of his 12 playoff appearances. He's went to the finals once. Obviously, that was with OKC a million years ago. He's just an example of a high-use player that's awesome during the regular season and can't sustain it in the playoffs. And at this point, 13 years in, is there another level that he can get to? I don't know if there is. And I think it's fair to question that at this point. He's the second star. You can't have effort be the issue. Joel Embiid, in this particular situation, which I'll get to in a moment, is not my question when it comes to the Sixers. If you force your way out of 2 teams, if you come into the Sixers with the expectations that James Harden should have as a superstar that he is, you should be more consistent with your performances. We have a pretty big sample size of his performances, not just with the Sixers, but in his career, in clutch time, and in the playoffs. It's not what it needs to be for a superstar level player. And you can talk about how things went overall as a team, and we will. But James Harden needed to be the juice last night. And not only was he not the juice, he was not good. And that is a desperate situation for the Sixers. Now, transitioning to the other side of things, Joel Embiid. Obviously, I've said over and over again, I think Joel Embiid is the MVP of the league. But last night was a brutal performance for the Sixers. Not just because they couldn't shoot, not because they were trying and things weren't falling and things just started to spiral or the Heat shot some obscene amount of threes or anything like that. There really just was no effort. There was nothing there. They were giving me nothing. And how does that happen with a great team in the playoffs, a team of professionals? You just have no energy and no effort. Well, they talked about it on TNT. Here is Charles Barkley.
Joel was so distracted by his MVP stuff. He came out with no energy, distracted, and the rest of the team followed.
I'm wondering if there's more than that.
No.
I'm wondering if he's
aching.
Yeah.
He just played good the last 2 games.
He played okay, yeah. He played okay.
He played well. He played
Look,
decent.
he's coming off a concussion. He got hit in the face tonight. I don't know.
He was distracted. The other players, because they're going to follow him, just like they did in Philly when they won the last 2 games. And he was out. He was just out of it. And, man, I feel bad because he's a great kid. But sometimes things happen that bother you.
Now, I respectfully disagree. I don't think that Joel Embiid is upset about not winning the MVP. I think he has a broken face and a torn ligament in his thumb. He is scraping himself up and dragging up and down the floor, giving everything that he has for this team that he is the leader of. But if Joel Embiid is a little down on the energy side, I'm not going to really lay that at Joel Embiid's feet at this point. You have James Harden. Doc Rivers needs to be held accountable in this situation. Someone else has to step up. I mean, Joel is giving everything he has. I don't think he's thinking about the MVP at all. How long ago was that? I don't even really want to keep talking about the MVP, but here we are. And here's Joel Embiid talking about missing out on the MVP.
This is something that I knew, weeks ago. Even probably 2 weeks before the season ended. After those games against whether it was against Denver and Milwaukee, and when he did his trouble or whatever, I just knew it wasn't gonna happen. And I'm not mad. That's 2 years in a row. I put myself in that position. It didn't happen. is almost like at this point is whatever happens.
Joel Embiid is not giving low energy because of the MVP. He